news and information from a higher perspective. Your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show for this Sunday, June 16th, 2013. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks' events, happenings in science, technology, politics, the media, just about everything. And we take a look at it from a higher perspective, from a spiritual point of view. It doesn't necessarily have to be woo-woo spiritual. And as I mention over and over again every time, it seems like every time I do this show, I mention over and over again that it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with spirituality, which is an essential part of our human nature. It is our human nature to have a sense of oneness with others and with the world around us, a sense of connection, and that's what spirituality is reflective of. So, when we look at the goings on around us from a spiritual perspective, we look at how we are creating these things on a higher sort of metaphysical level, and what they have to tell us about how we can grow and expand and become more fully that which we are, which is, for want of a better word, I like the term divine mind. I've always liked that term. And since the G word offends so many people these days, I think the divine mind is something that maybe people can connect with in a better way, a more healthy way. I think the G word has kind of become a trigger for all kinds of unhealthy beliefs and ideas and feelings that have come about through religious dogma, religious teachings that have been extreme or incorrect or simply unkind and unspiritual in many ways, if you will. So it's understandable that a lot of people don't like that word. It's understandable that a lot of people self-identify as atheists because the idea of God that is most prevalent or that they've been exposed to the most is the one that is put out by major religions. And while that is not particularly an accurate reflection of divine mind, it is the one most people are familiar with. And perhaps the first step in actually discovering spirituality is becoming an atheist in that sense of the word, in which you disconnect from that perception or that false image of God in the sky with a white beard and so forth and so on. So, not to get too far afield from what we want to talk about, because we've got a lot to talk about today. I apologize for not being on the air last week for any of those of you who missed me. Again, I apologize. When things come up, unlike many radio shows where you can have a host come in and sit in for you, I don't have that option. It's just me here. So when stuff comes up, unfortunately, I'm not able to do the show, but I will try to make up for what we've missed over the past 2 weeks and lend whatever insight or shed whatever light we can find on them. Well, I'm sensing a theme as I look at the news headlines, the things that are getting the most talk, the things that are getting the most play on news. And this is a very consistent theme, and when we have themes that show themselves in this very, very concrete way, we know it's something that we need to not only look at, but we know it's something we're creating to experience, to grow from. And here's what I'm seeing. Now, over the past few weeks, we have heard about concerns that the IRS has been invasive in determining applications for nonprofit status from groups they consider to be politically right wing, particularly the Tea Party groups. There's been concern that they have overstepped their bounds in their zealousness to make determinations about whether or not a political organization deserves nonprofit status. Now, the situation came about because the rules have changed slightly. Before, if you were a political organization and you were using your money to promote a political message, you did not qualify for nonprofit status. But because of some changes, now some organizations that have limited political activity can qualify for nonprofit status. However, determining the level of political activity for each of these groups has turned out to be problematic at best. And as a result, you have had the IRS taking extra scrutiny on groups that affiliate themselves as Tea Party members, etc., and so forth. So that is the situation. Next, we have been hearing an awful lot about how the government, particularly the Obama administration, went after reporters, AP reporters, that they suspected of leaking secrets. And so that has been a big debate too, in that we have and pride ourselves, of course, on freedom of the press in this country. And how far did the Department of Justice overstep their bounds in seeking out and obtaining material from AP reporters? So that has been a topic of conversation for the past couple of weeks. And then last Sunday, the biggest bombshell of them all was the confessions of one Edward Snowden, an analyst who works for a private company that contracts with our government, namely our government in the form of the NSA. And Mr. Snowden is what they call a whistleblower. In other words, he revealed information that the government would rather we didn't know. And that has to do with a huge database of what they call metadata. Metadata is data that informs about times that calls have been made, emails have been placed, logins, web surfs, all of these things. And what he's revealed is that basically the NSA since 2006 has been amassing the phone calls of just about every U.S. citizen. And he went on to talk about, Mr. Snowden went on to talk about the fact that he believed that he could tap the phone of anybody, up to and including the United States president, with the equipment and the technology that he had available to him as part of his job. Now, because of his clearance, when you have government clearance, part of obtaining that government clearance is a promise that you make that you will not disclose any information, any sensitive information that you are exposed to as part of your job. So, what Mr. Snowden felt compelled to do was to essentially break his promise to the government, because he felt that the government was abusing their ability, the ability to collect all of this data on every citizen without them really knowing that that is going on. Now, there have been all kinds of heated debates about this. Some call Mr. Snowden a hero for stepping forward and giving this information. Others are saying that he is a traitor and trying to bring down the American government. Others say, well, what's the big deal? We all know, everybody knows that your information is being collected. I'm not sure everybody knew that. I think we were aware that in some circumstances that data collection could and would happen. However, the massive amount of it, I think, took a lot of people by surprise. So, if I look at just those three things, and there are others going on too, but I don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but those three stories, which are what people are talking the most about, seem to reflect a fear and a bit of an awareness of our privacy, our ability to be who and what we are freely and without being judged or followed, that the government is taking away slowly freedoms that we have become accustomed to. Our freedom, or our right to privacy, particularly, that seems to be the overriding concern, our right and our freedom. And it is the government taking rights away from us. Now, there are a lot of signs, and have been for quite some time, that we are slowly becoming less and less of an open society. There have been books, one notably by Naomi Wolf, called The End of America, in which she recounts systematically how, bit by bit, our society appears to be closing. And by closing, that means that your freedoms to say what you want, to do what you want, to be who you want, are becoming more and more limited. Journalists being put in jail, so-called whistleblowers being pursued relentlessly, having your phone calls or your emails monitored to make sure you're not stepping out of line. All of this is many people have used the word Orwellian. Big Brother. And these are things that people are more and more concerned about. I mean, we've been predicting that this sort of thing would happen for decades now. 1984 was written in the 1940s. And, so this has been being predicted by people since that time. Now, 1984, when we actually did get to 1984, and we found out that we didn't really actually have a Big Brother-style government as detailed in that novel, many people probably dismissed it. But what was being predicted in that novel and many others was this idea that the more technology we have, the more it will be used for the government to know what you're doing and know who you are and know how to control you. That's been a big fear. And as we know, fear is something that is illusory. There's nothing in reality that needs to be feared. And those things that you do fear have more to do with unreality, with the illusions that we create, rather than who and what we really are. Now, this debate is very important and needs to be going on and should be going on. It's part of the illusion that we've created. We've designed it so that we can have this conversation with one another and start to understand, what does it mean to be a free person? What does it mean to be controlled? And certainly there is, on one level, a understanding that controlling relationships, or relationships in which there is an attempt to control you, are not healthy. Basically, what we're seeing is that in any relationship, whether it's your relationship to your government, or your relationship to your spouse, or your relationship to your family, or your mother, or your father, when one person or one entity in the relationship knows and can know and insists on knowing everything about you, everything you're doing, every thought you have, and you are not allowed to know the same about them, that's an imbalance. That's an imbalanced relationship. That's a relationship that lends itself very easily to abusive behavior. That being said, now let's go to a higher level, since this is what our show is about, is taking a look at these things at a higher level. The Course in Miracles explains that there are no secrets in reality. There is nothing that you can hide from another human being in reality, because we are connected in that way. We are all just who we are, and everything that is real is already well known, nothing that needs to be hidden, and nothing you could possibly hide. And to just explain that, everything that is real is who and what we are, our connection to Divine Mind, our ability to create everything for ourselves. That's all we need to know, and everybody is aware of it at some level. That's according to A Course in Miracles. But let me put this out here and put aside for the moment all of the other concerns that we have as American citizens. What would your life be like? What would life be like if everybody lived with the idea that everything they did was transparent? That everybody could see everything that you're doing. That everybody would know everything that you're doing. How would your behavior change? Would it change? Would it change for the better? Would you be a better human being if you knew that the negative thoughts that you have, perhaps the negative actions that you take that you think nobody else knows about, everybody knows about? Would we be better people to each other if we could see everything everybody does and relate to it and know it for what it really is, which is humans working through everything they need to work through in their lives, making so-called mistakes, doing things that perhaps they might not want to do or other people think is wrong. And looking at that, knowing what everybody else knows about everybody else, and recognizing the truth of what that means, that they are you, and you can relate to whatever problems they're having because you're having something very similar. When you are able to look at what other people are doing and know that that is part of you, what you're seeing is you reflected, then how would you live your life? And it's just a thought. It's just a thought. How would you live your life knowing that everybody will see you when you mess up, will see you when you do good, will see you when you have a bad day? Will it change things for you? Will it make you think about your actions more? Would it make you think about what you want to put out there, what you want people to see? Or would you just let it all hang out and let everybody deal with it in whatever way they're going to deal with it? It's an interesting question. I don't have a definitive answer. I'm not looking for a definitive answer. It's just a question, an idea. The idea of transparency. And there's a relationship to that and the idea of trust. And when you talk about trust, you're also talking about faith. Because trust and faith are very similar. Faith is the belief in things unseen. Faith is the confidence in things unseen. Truth, trust, is confidence in something or someone because of often it's because of who and what they are. Sometimes it's because of past actions. But having trust in something, having trust in someone, is a leap of faith, because at any time, any given thing or any given person can let you down. That's just the way it is. But in actuality, no one can let you down, because the actions around you, the actions of others, don't need to affect you in that way. It's all in how you deal with what you see. And if you can look at things from a higher perspective, as I try to do, and this show is part of me trying to do it. I don't say that I'm successful with it all the time or even half of the time, but I feel like if I focus more on it, I'll get better at it. And perhaps the idea of transparency, that everyone can see what you're doing, is a help in that rather than a hindrance. Just a thought. All right. So now to wrap up the show, I'm going to continue our discussion about Higgs boson, the Higgs boson and its relationship with string theory. You've probably heard quite a bit about the Higgs boson particle, also known as the God particle, which has recently been confirmed as having been verified that its existence is actually there. And so many people still, it's a very complex topic for sure, and it's hard if you're not a physicist. It's hard even for physicists to wrap their heads around it. Us normal people probably don't stand much of a chance, but I'm going to give it a shot and break it down as easy as I've been able to. So the biggest question is, people want to know, why is this called a God particle? What does God have to do with it? Well, you think of Higgs boson as basically an invisible force field, and it's very much like the Force in the movie Star Wars. It's this energy field that can turn anything into solid matter. Basically, it's the power of manifestation. And I think it's been nicknamed the God particle because we can't actually see bosons, especially, but Higgs bosons in particular, we can't see them. They're invisible. We only know they're there because we observe patterns. They leave clues that they've been there. But they're so small that scientists are unable to actually see them to observe anything. So here's the theory. Now, if you subscribe to the idea that there was a Big Bang, which is what most of science is focused on, Big Bang is this pure energy, and from the Big Bang came particles of energy, massless energy. Basically, the Big Bang was an explosion of pure potential. And when it first happened, scientists speculate that it was this energy of pure potential. Nothing had formed into mass. It was just massless energy. And then suddenly, no one's been able to find out how or why, this Higgs field turned on. And they describe it as this sort of turning on of this energy that gave mass to certain particles, turned them, manifested them into something in physical matter, while others remained pure energy. So scientists have been wondering, what's up with the boson, Higgs boson? Why did it turn on? What triggered it? And how does it work? So that's the basis behind the idea of the God particle and this mysterious field of energy. Now, bosons are particular particles in physics. Higgs boson is a very special boson. Bosons, in general, are considered to be massless particles. And they carry force. They carry energy. But they have no mass themselves. They give that energy or push that energy onto others. Fermions are the other particles. They're the ones that have matter. They have weight. They carry matter and weight. So the bosons affect the fermions. So there is some theory that this Higgs boson energy, when it turned on after the Big Bang, was turned on by some intelligence. And there are others who believe it was just a chain reaction of things. So we'll get more into that in our next shows and upcoming shows. So till then, make may the force be with you. Have a wonderful week.